We're counting down 10 ghost towns in Texas that modern maps barely acknowledge. Places raised by hope, erased by shifting fortunes, and now remembered only by empty roads, silent smokestacks, forgotten depots, and dust. Some vanished because railroads moved. Others dried up when wells failed, highways bypassed main streets, or company payrolls ended overnight. These were county seats, oil camps, mining grids, and spa resorts where futures were once wagered on coal, on water, on boom-time dreams. Each entry traces how ambition, geography, and the laws of economics could wipe a community clean off the landscape, raising the question, if entire towns can dissolve without a trace, what does permanence mean here? Let's begin, starting with number 10. In the 10th place, Thurber stands as a reminder of how a single industry can shape and then erase a community. Founded in 1888 by the Texas and Pacific Coal Company, Thurber rose from the prairie as a company-owned coal town, built to fuel the steam locomotives that drove Texas's expansion. At its peak between 1918 and 1920, as many as 10,000 people lived and worked here, miners from Italy, Poland, Mexico, and beyond, all drawn by the promise of steady work and a better life. The town boasted an opera house, a hotel, schools, churches, even its own electric plant and company store, all enclosed within a fence that marked the company's reach. But Thurber's fortunes were tied to coal, and when the railroad switched to oil in the 1920s, the mines closed almost overnight. Strikes, layoffs, and the slow dismantling of the town followed. By the late 1930s, Thurber was nearly empty, its bustling streets reduced to dust and silence. Today, a single brick smokestack, a restored church, a cemetery, and a museum are all that remain, quiet sentinels on the edge of the highway. Thurber's story is a lesson in economic gravity. Even a town built for thousands can vanish when its purpose is lost. Number 9. Helena stands as a county seat erased by a railroad bypass and the shifting tides of local power. Founded in 1852 at a crossing of old cattle and stagecoach trails, Helena quickly anchored Karnes County as its administrative heart, with a population that hovered around 250 to 300 during the 1880s. The town's stone courthouse, jail, and cluster of churches signaled permanence in a landscape where most settlements were still little more than tents and timber. For 40 years, county government and courthouse business kept Helena bustling, until a single decision made miles away changed everything. In 1886, the San Antonio and Aransas Pass Railroad, pressured by local ranching interests and personal vendettas, rerouted its line 7 miles to the east, bypassing Helena entirely. The economic lifeline vanished overnight. By 1894, the county seat moved to the new rail town of Karnes City, and Helena's businesses, hotels, and even its newspaper faded into the dust. Today, the restored courthouse houses the Karnes County Museum, and a handful of buildings and cemetery markers linger beside empty roads. Helena's story is a quiet reminder, in Texas, the fate of a town could hinge on a railroad map and the shifting currents of county politics. In 8th place, Lobo stands as a stark lesson in the dangers of staking a town's future on a single, volatile resource. Founded in 1907 on the edge of the West Texas desert, Lobo sprang up around newly discovered cinnabar deposits, raw ore for Mercury, a metal in high demand for hats and industrial uses. By the early 1920s, nearly 600 people called this remote camp home, their lives revolving around the hum of the processing mill and the rhythm of shipments bound for distant markets. But the good times were short-lived. When mercury prices crashed in the late 1920s and the best ore veins ran dry, the town's fortunes fell just as quickly as they had risen. A brief revival during World War II offered hope, but it faded with the war's end. By 1947, Lobo was abandoned, its schoolhouse empty, its post office shuttered. Today, only the concrete foundations of the mill and a handful of graves in the windswept cemetery remain, fading quietly into private ranch land. Lobo's ruins warn of the risk that come with betting everything on a single commodity. When the market turns, even the most hopeful settlement can vanish, leaving little more than dust and memory behind. Number 7. Toyahvale tells the story of a spa town whose fortunes rose and fell with the railroad timetable. Founded in 1903, Toyahvale grew from a dusty siding into a destination thanks to the Pecos Valley and Northeastern Railway, which brought travelers seeking the promise of its mineral-rich hot springs. At its peak in the late 1920s, nearly 800 people lived here. Hotel guests, spa workers, ranchers, and railwaymen, all drawn by the soothing waters and the easy access provided by daily passenger trains. The bathhouse, with its steaming pools, became the centerpiece of local life, while the depot stood ready to welcome new arrivals. But in 1934, the railway abandoned its line, severing the town's connection to the outside world almost overnight. The flow of visitors slowed to a trickle, and even a brief oil boom could not restore Toyahvale's lost momentum. Today, the historic bathhouse still welcomes a handful of travelers, its doors open to those who seek the spring's warmth. The old depot sits in quiet ruin, a reminder of how easily prosperity can cool when the tracks go silent and the world moves on. Number 6. Claremont stands as a monument to the limits of engineering optimism in the West Texas dust. Founded in 1908 by the Texas Irrigation Company, Claremont was mapped out as a model farm colony with ambitious plans for a canal system to transform the arid plains into productive cotton and grain fields. Early settlers believed in the promise of water. By 1913, nearly 400 people called the town home, building a schoolhouse, a church, and a handful of shops along the main road. But the rains never came as expected. From 1916 to 1918, relentless drought shrank the Double Mountain aquifer, and disputes with neighboring ranchers over water rights soon tied the canal project up in court. The Texas Water Board's 1919 report described the scheme as unworkable. By 1920, the irrigation dream had collapsed, and within 5 years the settlement was abandoned. Today, only the foundations of the school and church remain, scattered across county land, along with a lone sandstone water tank, silent evidence of a town that bet everything on water and lost. Claremont's story is a cautionary note in the larger Texas tale. Even the best laid plans cannot outlast the realities of drought and law in the open plains. Number 5. Glen Rio sits on the Texas-New Mexico border as a silent witness to the rise and fall of America's highway era. Founded in 1905 when the railroad pushed west, Glen Rio grew up around a depot and by 1926 found itself straddling the new Route 66, America's main street. For decades, this tiny outpost thrived on the steady flow of travelers. Gas stations, diners, and motels lined the highway, serving families and truckers making the long drive between Amarillo and Albuquerque. At its peak, Glen Rio's population hovered around 250, with businesses on both sides of the state line taking advantage of dual tax codes and steady highway traffic. When the new highway opened in 1975, bypassing Glen Rio by just a few miles, the steady stream of cars and trucks vanished overnight. Businesses closed their doors, and the town emptied out. Today, the shell of the Glen Rio Motel, a rusted service station, and the crumbling depot foundations remain on land managed by the Bureau of Land Management. The wind moves through empty rooms and over broken signs. The silence broken only by the distant hum of passing trucks on the interstate. Glen Rio's story is a stark reminder of how quickly fortunes can change when a single policy decision about where to lay a new highway can erase a town from the map, leaving only faded neon and forgotten dreams along the old road. Coming to the top 3, the original Terlingua mining district stands as Mercury's forgotten cradle, a place where the Texas desert once rang with the sound of industry, and now only the wind moves through broken stone and scattered graves. Founded in the late 1880s, Terlingua rose on the promise of cinnabar, the ore that yielded quicksilver, or mercury. By the early 1900s, nearly 600 miners and their families worked and lived here, their days shaped by the grind of the ore mill and the lure of high prices driven by the hat-making trade, and later, military contracts during World War I. Company ledgers from this era show steady shipments of mercury to factories in El Paso and San Antonio, fueling both local growth and distant industry. But after the war, the bottom fell out. Global mercury prices collapsed, and by 1922, the main mill closed its doors for good. Within a decade, the settlement was abandoned, its short-lived prosperity erased by the same market forces that had built it. Today, the foundations of the old mill sit exposed to the sun, and a small cemetery with 22 weathered graves marks the resting place of those who never left. These remains, visible from the county road, tell a story not of ghosts, but of ambition and risk, of a community built on the edge of the frontier, undone by the volatility of a single commodity. In Terlingua, the ruins and the silence serve as quiet evidence that even the most promising settlements can vanish, leaving only stone, dust, and the memory of what once was. Number 3. Barstow stands as a rare case where the very heart of a county was physically uprooted and moved, leaving only faint traces in the West Texas dirt. Surveyed in 1898, Barstow was chosen as the first county seat of Ward County, its location tied to the Pecos River, and the hope that water would anchor ranchers and travelers crossing the plains. At its height around 1902, Barstow supported a population of about 150, just enough to fill the wooden courthouse, keep the general store open, and justify a small jail and schoolhouse set among scattered homes. The courthouse was more than a building. It was the center of local life, the place where land deals were struck and disputes settled. But the promise of water proved unreliable, and by 1911, pressure mounted to move the county seat to Monahans, a site with better wells and growing oil prospects. When the commissioner's vote passed, the shift was literal. Barstow's courthouse was dismantled and hauled piece by piece to Monahans, its foundation left exposed to the elements. The town's brief moment as an administrative hub ended almost overnight. By 1920, fewer than 30 residents remained, and the prairie began its slow reclamation. Today, all that stands is the courthouse's stone foundation, half buried in grass, and a small cemetery fenced off from the wind. County records and land trust files still mark Barstow's name. But on the ground, there is almost nothing to suggest a county government once operated here. The erasure is nearly total, a reminder that even the machinery of local authority can vanish, leaving only stone, silence, and a handful of names in the soil. Number 2. Texon stands as a stark reminder of how even the most carefully planned company towns can evaporate almost overnight when the resource that built them runs dry. Founded in 1955 by the Texon Oil Company, this mid-century enclave rose from the scrubland of Reagan County at the height of the Permian Basin oil boom. Company records and oral histories describe a place built to last. 120 single-family homes, a school, a clinic, a grocery, and a church, all clustered near the humming refinery and the once mighty Texon field. At its peak in 1962, nearly 400 people called Texon home, their lives shaped by the rhythms of the oil patch and the steady hand of corporate management. The company provided not just jobs, but a sense of order. Streets were paved, lawns trimmed, and the water ran clear thanks to a private treatment plant. Yet beneath the surface, the town's fate was tied to the pressure gauges deep underground. By the early 1970s, the oil field's reservoir pressure began to fall, and the refinery's output dwindled. When Texon Oil merged with a larger conglomerate, the new management saw little reason to maintain the town. In a matter of months, the company withdrew support, shuttered the refinery, and offered relocation assistance to the remaining families. By 1980, fewer than 50 residents remained. Most of the houses sold off or left to weather in the West Texas sun. Today, a handful of original homes still stand, some repurposed as private ranch dwellings, while the concrete pads of the old refinery sprawl behind locked gates. The schoolhouse, once filled with the voices of children, now serves as a community hall for the nearby town of Big Lake. Texon's story exposes the limits of corporate paternalism and the illusion of permanence in an economy built on extraction. The infrastructure was real: streets, homes, clinics, but the promise was only as solid as the oil beneath it. When the wells faltered, the company simply switched off the town, leaving behind a scattering of structures and a lesson written in the dust. In Texas, even the most modern towns can vanish as quickly as they appeared, erased not by disaster, but by a boardroom decision and the slow decline of a field. And finally, in first place, Sherwood stands as the last word on how the fate of a town can be decided not by drought, market crashes, or shifting railroads, but by the stroke of a pen in a distant office. Founded in 1912 on the edge of Irrigation County, Sherwood was born out of ambition, an irrigation colony set to transform dusty ranchland into a wheat-producing hub. By 1917, nearly 250 people called this place home. The grain elevator, built from local stone, towered over fields of wheat and sorghum, its silhouette promising prosperity anchored by the Pecos River's water. For a few years, the gamble seemed to pay off. Tax rolls from the era show rising values, and the depot on the Santa Fe Railway kept Sherwood connected to far-off markets. But in 1921, everything changed. The Texas Water Board issued a decision that revoked Sherwood's claim to Pecos River water, stripping the town of its most vital resource. The canals ran dry and the elevator's bins emptied out. With no water, the wheat fields failed, and the railway, no longer needed, pulled out by 1924. The exodus was swift. By 1935, fewer than 30 residents remained, the rest scattered to neighboring towns or farther afield. Today, the roofless stone grain elevator still stands, listed on the Texas Historic Sites Register, a solitary landmark on private land. The schoolhouse foundation and a few stone homes are visible from the county road, but the silence is total. No post office, no depot, no main street. Sherwood's story is the ultimate lesson in impermanence. Here, the law itself erased a community, proving that even a town built on the promise of water and hard work can be wiped from the map by a single legal decision. In the end, what remains is not just stone and empty fields, but the quiet evidence that permanence in Texas is always subject to the next decision handed down from above. Across all 10 vanished towns, one truth emerges. In Texas, permanence is an illusion. Even places built on oil, railroads, and county charters fade when fortunes shift, and landscapes reclaim their own. What endures isn't the map, but the quiet evidence: dusty streets, leaning signs, empty courthouses, reminding us that ambition leaves only footprints in the grass. Which lost place made you pause? Let us know in the comments below.